Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Meskó, and you're watching the Medical Futurist live Q&A session. If you could just confirm that you can hear me right, you can see me well, I would be really grateful because I want to make sure after a few issues in the past. Thank you so much for all those of you being here with me today. I see that you've sent plenty of questions already, not just on the YouTube channel, but also through the Eventbrite website. So thank you for that. I will start with those questions. Thank you guys for confirming that you can hear me and see me well. I really appreciate that. So this is our regular monthly, the Medical Futurist live Q&A session. First of all, I have to tell you that I'm sorry for not being able to answer all the questions you sent to me through the social media channels we are active on. We are doing our best, the Medical Futurist team, but that's why we have these sessions today, like today, to make sure that whatever question you might have about the future of medicine, healthcare, digital health technologies, anything you are interested in around those topics, I will do my absolute best to try to tackle as many questions as possible and to try to give you specific answers, not just big picture stuff about these exciting issues. So the plan is that for today we have a general Ask Me Anything session. We don't focus on any issues. However, as many of you sent me questions about recent news in the past couple of days, I have a few recent news on my Chrome browser here, just to make sure that we can go through a few to touch up on a few issues, the context around digital health technologies, some interesting issues about artificial intelligence and so on, while I will also try to answer your questions. As usual, we have our editor-in-chief, Judith Kusko, with us on the chat today. So she will send you links to analysis, articles, videos we have published already about the topics you asked me questions around. So we can make sure that you will get all the analysis we have published already. If you don't know me or the Medical Futurist, just very briefly, I'm the Medical Futurist. My background is a medical doctor with a PhD in genomics, but more than a decade ago now, I switched to futuristic studies. I'm a professional futurist, and my job is to create visions about the future of medicine and healthcare, and then try to find out what we have to do today to get to those desired visions, not the other ones around. At the Medical Futurist, we do the same job in a team of 12 people, and we try to provide the context around these technologies. So we check all the announcements, all the reports, all the studies that come out, most of them, and then we try to give you only those that really matter. Plus, we try to provide you with the insights that truly matter. But looking through and hearing through the noise, that's the kind of job we try to do at the Medical Futurist. You're more than welcome to follow us on our YouTube channel here, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, where we publish analysis several times every single day, and also on medicalfuturist.com, where you can find 2 articles published every single week. So let's dive into the amazing questions you've been sending to me. First of all, I have to start with this question. Blood Execute has a question. What do you think is the future of cancer immunotherapy and cancer vaccines? The reason why it's such a wonderful question is that literally 30 minutes ago, I took part at an event virtually, of course, organized by the European Health Forum. And the main topic, the discussion I had with Vivian Parry, a BBC reporter, was around cancer immunotherapies and cell and gene therapies in general. And it's a very exciting topic. These therapies have had quite a bit PR in the past couple of decades. Many clinical trials failed in the 1990s. But what has changed because of the pandemic is that the pandemic has led to quite a big attention spike for these technologies because of the mRNA-based vaccines that everyone is talking about worldwide. So maybe because of that reason, there is a better chance that policymakers would have the right idea about how to regulate those technologies, and maybe patients and physicians could better manage their expectations about what to expect from using these advanced technologies. But cancer immunotherapy has been around before the pandemic, but the mRNA, the boost in funding for the mRNA-based vaccines, I have no idea, will give another boost to cancer immunotherapy clinical trials too. So thank you for the question. And now going back to the beginning, we had some questions a few minutes before the session started. Tess G had a question about, could there be a topic on prototyping small surgical tools using 3D printers? I would love to help you with that, but I cannot. That's just not my area of expertise. But if you want to make sure that you can reach out to people who can help you, if I were you, I would reach out to the makerspace community of your location. There are makerspace communities around the world. They're excellent and amazing people, and they're very good at doing these prototypes and using 3D printers. So makerspace.com might be the website you want to start with. HV Singh. For a newcomer, on what projects one should focus on in AI in healthcare domain? I think that you should focus on patient design. I've talked about patient design many times here in this channel. Patient design means that we involve patients on the highest level of decision making. So if you want to develop something in artificial intelligence in the healthcare domain, I understand your enthusiasm, and of course that's great that you're excited about the technology and using that technology in healthcare. But you cannot find out what to do, what to develop a technology for, unless you reach out to patients. So if I were you, I would go to social media, I would look for patients, and I would try to actively look for what kind of needs they are talking about. And if there is a need I might have an idea for, then I would start focusing on describing that idea in automation and healthcare. Ratan Priya has a question about an exciting theme. Let me share that with all of you. How to start providing automation services to the healthcare industry. Again, you don't start just providing automation services. You have to understand the needs, the gaps that exist in healthcare. If the gap is a communication gap between patients and physicians, then maybe a chatbot could be a solution. If the gap in medical decision making between medical professionals and the medical studies, they are not able to check physically because there are more than 30 million of them, then maybe that's the gap you want to fill with automation. But that starts with listening to the needs patients and physicians have every day before trying to develop something for them, especially in automation. Omkar Pandey, hello, how are you? Thank you. I'm doing really fine. I haven't traveled for 16 months for now. I miss traveling. I miss seeing you in person. I miss giving speeches and keynotes on stages and meeting people, not talking into a lens of a camera for 12 hours a day. I miss all that, but I have a few new hobbies, and otherwise, I think I'm doing fine. Football is something I miss very much, but now with the pandemic situation in this country, Hungary, easing a little bit, even football is coming back. So we can go back with my friends and play football once or twice every month. Theodorus Ibrahim, suspended animation, Cryonics is a very important medical futurist technology because it gives the patient access to all of the developments in the future. It's true on paper and in movies and in science fiction books, but there is no medical study, clinical trial available yet, proving that cryonics in fact works, and those patients who go through cryonics and suspended animation can come back to life decades from now. Again, the idea is far-fetched and amazing, but let's see some proof about that in action. It's great to see so many names I come across many times here. Jose Quintini, Balint, Ivor Juster. It's great to see you again here. Thank you for being with us again. So, going through the questions. Omkar Pandey, future of medical device and software quality assurance. I'm doing my best. The more precise, the more specific question you can give to me, maybe the better answer I can provide. It's such a broad question that I don't want to spend time here just, going through a general topic, because maybe you're interested in a specific aspect of that. Please feel free to share that, and then I will come back to this. Unplugged Heartfulness. Please suggest best digital medical devices for customers in future and how we can get the best prices. The question is kind. I guess the intention at least is kind. I don't I cannot suggest you medical devices. I do review digital health technologies on medicalfuturist.com, and you can check all of them for free on the website. And I'm looking at my right because I have 3-4 shelves here full of digital health devices. And I keep on sharing those with you every day, almost every day on our social media channels. But if you, and Judith Cusco, our editor-in-chief, can send a link to you in the chat to the body map of health sensors we published. In that body map, I think I included all the technologies I liked. Unplugged Heartfulness, thank you for the question about how startups should enter the market, but I cannot comment on such business issues. It has nothing to do with digital health or the future of medicine in particular. Okay, going through. Sharon Samuel, what do you think is the future of dermatology? What a nice question to include in the chat. Well, we published an analysis, and I'm trying to look it up for you so I can share it with you in the live session, about all the medical specialties that will be impacted by digital health technologies. Here it is. And I want to share with you an infographic we published back then. Here it is. As you can see, I think I've mentioned this before. We try to use two axes. One is about how interaction-based versus data-based. So that's the axis. Why you can see my mouse here, my cursor. So it's on the top you see how much interaction, how interaction-based specialty is. On the bottom you can see how data-based specialty is. On the right, how creative versus on the left, how repetitive medical specialties. And based on that, you can find dermatology on almost the bottom left corner, which means it's quite a repetitive and database job. Many elements of dermatology could be replaced with automation. And to further prove it to you, let me share quite an exciting news about from Google. It took place or came out a few weeks ago, and it was about how Google is working on publishing an algorithm that uses photos from smartphone apps to analyze skin lesions. And that's not something Google came up with. The idea has been around for many years. I even reviewed Skin Vision and their technology in that respect. But Google making that algorithm widely available, this is a huge step forward. And it also shows the role technologies could play in the near future of dermatology. Just to give you a right example about how I see this vision become real is my own experience as a patient. My genetic risk for skin cancer is like about 8 times higher than the average. It sounds bad, I know. And that's why I get checked out by a dermatologist every single year. I have dozens of skin lesions, so she checks those out one by one. But there are 2 suspicious lesions that we keep a closer eye on every year. And I also made photos in the Skin Vision app of those 2 lesions, so we can compare the images during the annual checkups. We can make sure that those don't change that much over a year. So even if something bad happens, there's a skin cancer on my body, we might be able to catch it early or even prevent it from happening. So that's how I see the future of dermatology. All right. Yuri Urales, this is an exciting question. Let me share the question with you all. Not this one. Okay. I heard you lecture on quantum computing. Will we live to be 100 years once they get a universal quantum computer working? It's a great question because you combine many questions into one. I think, well, longevity is one issue rising up here. I do believe that there will be amazing medications and cures, new treatments that might lead to longer lifespans. But I still more firmly believe that my chance as a patient to take active part in my health and disease management, to download my medical records, to obtain data about my lifestyle and disease, these will have a much larger role in my longevity than those longevity medications that might come out in decades from now. So that's about that. About quantum computing, I think quantum computing methods could indeed help us live longer. If you look at how artificial narrow intelligence can already lead to drug combinations nobody could think of before, or drug repurposing models, or better medical decision making through scanning through millions of medical studies and textbooks for physicians. It's quite clear that with more automation, with a higher computer power, or better calculations, we might make even better decisions on the go. So maybe quantum computers could lead to that, but as you could see in the videos I published about that, not in the next years or so, maybe a decade from now, if you are very fortunate and optimistic. So thank you for the question. Wow, 53 Rajiv has an exciting question about going to Mars and the future of healthcare. The future of healthcare in Mars, which key steps should be taken before going to Mars? Actually, one of my first studies that I published as the medical futurist when I switched from genomics and life sciences to futuristic studies was about this exact topic. And I'm very proud of that because I could publish in the same journal where Elon Musk published his Mars plans a few months before that. This paper here is about which digital health technologies we would need to support human missions to Mars. And I describe all these issues, all the potential technologies, the advanced ones, of course, and also share a vision about what life on Mars would be like. So I'm sharing this with you in the chat in case you want to check it out. My health, my care. Good to see you. Good to see you too. Thank you for being here in the session. Rohan Rawat, sir, is there any way to make HIV vaccine? I think they're very much, I come back to this. They are very much working on that, and they have made significant progress in HIV vaccines around the world. Ivor Juster, what an exciting question you just asked about IBM Watson. What are your thoughts about IBM's Watson and healthcare? From day one, I've been extremely excited about what IBM could achieve with its automation platform. When I saw the US quiz show Jeopardy and how Watson could beat the best players, genius players, it was quite clear that it could contribute to medical sciences and healthcare as well. I assume that IBM has had some managerial issues, some business issues around IBM Watson. Maybe the marketing hype was too big around the technology and they couldn't deliver to meet those amazing expectations, maybe. But I know that it's still in action and they're still working on that. And there are some health institutions, especially in the US, where they use Watson today in supporting medical decision making. So I see the business issues. I see that the hype was too big, but I remain optimistic that if they can prove their worth in clinical trials and medical studies, then Watson will become a common part of medical practice. As it seems today, not in years, but maybe again in half a decade or a full decade from now. Sunny Ahonshi, do you think that the big pharma will allow other therapies to deal with cancer for treatment? Or other companies, I guess that's what you meant by that. I don't think it's the decision of big pharma what to allow and what not to allow. There are startups using such advanced technologies like the 3D printing medications that pharma companies using traditional technologies will find it hard to compete with. Therefore, now these startups can have a large impact on patients' lives and even on the ways pharma companies operate their businesses. So maybe let's look at this issue from that perspective, that how startups using advanced digital health technologies could have a huge impact on making the big pharma better and focusing more on innovative cancer treatments. Robert, I want to know, is there any way to control our antibody capability? Not that I know of any. I don't think there are any. I assume you imply by the question that you want to make sure that you have enough antibodies against COVID-19 after a vaccination or after going through COVID-19 itself. There are no ways like that as far as I know, but there might be some innovative ideas out there, but I would be a bit surprised if any existed right now. Okay, looking through the list of questions here. Oh, Blood Execute, another question about quantum computing. Do you think computational methods in both clinical trials and drug discovery across all therapeutic areas will become more accurate and or reliable? Well, the answer is simple, because if we have a process that is very much data-based, then of course with better calculations, it can lead to better decisions. With more data, we can get more accurate decisions. I know it's general, but with quantum computing, the scale that we'll have to look at, even comparing traditional methods in drug repurposing, for example, today, compared to using artificial narrow intelligence for the same purpose and then using quantum computing, using AI for the same purpose, we see huge gaps between these methods. And that's why quantum computing is, its potentials are unimaginable as of today. But based on what we've seen regarding calculations and computations, maybe, I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe quantum computing leads to an era where we people, life scientists, cannot even grasp, cannot even understand anymore how quantum computing technologies lead to cures and treatments we have never thought of before. Maybe. I know it sounds great because we will have cures and treatments, new ones, but on the other side, we won't understand what's going on around us. So maybe we lose control in healthcare, and that doesn't sound that bad, that good. Well, we will have to tackle these two sides at the same time. Subham Banerjee, when will AI take over healthcare completely? Well, I used the same answer I just gave in the last question. Anything that is data-based could be more accurate with more data, but healthcare is not only a data-based process. It's not a linear process that I can measure everything about you. I can send you to an MRI scan and PET scan, all the scans. I can measure all your blood markers and biomarkers and sequence your genome and microbiome and everything. I can examine everything about yourself. It still won't mean that I can give you the right diagnosis, the right treatment for sure, because healthcare is not that much data-based. It also depends on interactions. It matters what symptoms patients mention first. Plus, it also, the whole healthcare system involves empathy and compassionate care. And in that, you can put these things into algorithms no matter how hard you try. So AI will not take over healthcare completely, but I firmly hope that all the repetitive tasks in AI will be taken over completely by automation. Apurva Joshi, I think that's a beautiful question that you just asked. Currently, electronic health records cause a lot of physician burnout. Do you think AI can replace human inputs and improve the situation? If not human input, I think AI can replace the analysis part. That input is hard. I mean, even using voice-to-text applications, it's possible that physicians have a discussion with a patient and the things they say out loud will be translated and transformed into a medical record, a report about the patient-physician visit, and put into the medical record. So physicians only have to check out what those reports contain, and they just confirm that, yes, that's what I told the patient and that's what's in the report. That sounds great. But the really exciting part here is the analysis part, that we have, hundreds of millions of medical records of patients worldwide in hospital systems, and there is no human being who could analyze all those bunches of data, but AI could do that for us. And maybe that could lead to new methods for diagnosis or new methods for treatments. And that's something I'm excited about when it comes to AI analyzing medical records. Blood execute, I can't comment on developments for specific diseases because I don't focus on them. On one day, I have to deal with focusing on one specific technology like bioprinting human tissues, and then the same day zoom out and look at the cultural transformation we call digital health. But in that job, I have no chance for focusing on specific diseases and what treatments or therapies might come out in those areas. Omkar Pandey, why interoperability in healthcare is so hard to achieve? Because not all the technologies used in healthcare can be found in one hand. That's why. There are vendors coming out with electronic medical records. There are vendors, I'm looking at my shelves with all the gadgets here. There are many vendors coming out with these health gadgets. And then my physician has to submit reports about me and to my healthcare providers and insurance companies through a different vendor software. And nobody's dealing with connecting all these together. If I want to make it happen as a patient, it requires tremendous effort. And of course, if there's a health IT issue, I cannot solve that. But That's why interoperability is such a big issue. Ricky Brown, this guy is a complete liar. Please elaborate what you mean by that. I don't think I have been lying to you in any ways. SPTV, what are your views on virtual pharmacy? If you could elaborate on that, that would be great, because we published analysis about the future of pharmacies. And in that, I depicted 3 scenarios for the future of pharmacies. But otherwise, if you could be a bit more specific about what you're interested in, I would be more than happy to try to tackle. Nathan Kakis, I can't give you medical advice about not even treatments, but even about diet for specific conditions. I'm sorry about that. 53 Rajiv, can digital dispensaries have significant impact and become profitable? I guess you mean those tiny gadgets or boxes that are dispensing medications for patients, usually elderly patients. I've seen many on the market in the last couple of years. I think none could break the walls in healthcare. I do think that the idea has a valid idea, and for elderly patients or for patients where compliance could be an issue with some mental health conditions, these could be useful and profitable, but I haven't seen any of these companies breaking through the walls. Ben Balint, any thoughts on how space tech paves the way for healthcare developments? Well, you got me with that, because we do have a new article coming out. Now, it just came out today. That's how up to date I am about our own articles. This article came out earlier today, about the top 5 healthcare areas that space technology can enhance, from diagnosing the remotest patients to downsizing labs and at-home lab tests, next generation wearables. So please feel free to check it out on our website. Our editor-in-chief will share the link with you in a minute or so. Omkar Pandey, how effective is VR and haptics for training surgeons? You know, the first medical events I took part in was in California about 13, 14 years ago. And even at those events, I saw amazing study results and reports about how VR could be used in the near future for training surgeons. And maybe training surgeons was one of the best ideas even back then. Now, if you check out research teams like Brandon Spiegel's research team on the East Coast, then you'll find excellent examples about how it could be used, not just for surgeon training, but also for easing pain for patients with certain medical conditions who have to stay at the hospital for a longer time. So there are amazing examples for that. And Skip Rizzo, that's the name of the researcher I wanted to give to you. Skip Rizzo, Albert Skip Rizzo is the god of this area, training surgeons with VR and haptics. So you might want to check out what his team has been doing, and you will get a great idea about the specifics too. Sunny Alonzi, I don't know about startups that have developed such technologies in oncology treatment, because most startups don't develop treatments, but develop approaches that pharma companies might use that might lead to treatments. One company that comes to my mind is Turbine, Turbine, Turbine.io, as far as I remember. No, Turbine.ai. I also add the link to you, so very soon you will see this link in the chat section. Richard Kavanagh. Oh, thank you for the very thoughtful question. Let me share that with everyone else. We are at the tipping point for ownership and access to our personal health data. Legislation being drafted in many countries, though the meaning is effectively eroding this. What's your view? If you're referring to GDPR and legislations like that, that's true and valid. I still think that my health data belong to me because I paid for that through a private system, through an insurance, or through my taxes. So essentially, health data should keep on belonging to me. I know it's not true in practice because my health data can be found in many health IT systems and infrastructures. Some of those I cannot even access myself. But the general understanding that I think policymakers should have about this is that health data must belong to the patients. And this is what I've seen in Estonia as a great example, or Germany or Denmark, where they even said it out loud that the healthcare governments must empower patients, and that's an excellent way to do that. But you are right making that point that I haven't seen any policies on a governmental level that would be like exemplary for anyone else. There are good examples in countries like I mentioned before. Maybe the FDA is a good example about regulating advanced technologies. But regarding health data, it's there is a bargain we have to acknowledge here, that it's really impossible for digital health and AI-based technologies to improve without my health data, without my medical records, the data coming from my smartphone apps, my health smartwatch, my health sensors, my genetic tests. So we have to give up some of our privacy in exchange for a chance for a longer and healthier life through these technologies. I'm afraid that's the line we have to keep in mind at the end of the day. Atul Harmony, it's an excellent question, and this question comes up so many times because, of course, there are hundreds of millions of diabetic patients who are longing for the answer about non-invasive glucose monitoring. I think in itself, non-invasive glucose monitoring doesn't exist yet. I've seen experimental technologies with using lights and laser beams, but even thinking about those devices like Abbott Freestyle Libre that goes on under just under your skin, even though it's much more comfortable than any device before that, it's still invasive. So thinking about non-invasive blood glucose sensors, again, there are studies, and if you go to medgadget.com, you will find, I think, dozens of similar studies, but none of those is in action and used in practice right now. But again, I have no doubts that we will have non-invasive, indirectly measured glucose monitoring very soon. I agree, Theodore. There are excellent questions coming in. Ratam Priya, what a kind question to ask. Okay, let me share that with everyone else. What sparked your interest in the future of digital healthcare, and how did you proceed with it? Meaning, what skills did you focus on to start having an accurate reading about the latest technologies? Thank you. My interest was sparked when I was about 6. I got a book from my mother about the scientific method. So that time I knew that I would dedicate my life to doing research in sciences. But first I thought it would be life sciences, especially genetics and genomics. But then, as technology played no part in that, immediately after my PhD, I started switching towards futuristic studies. And in that sense, there are skills, I will describe that in a second, but there are no courses you can do to make sure that your background is good enough to become a professional futurist. It's a profession I chose for myself. There are steps that all of us, I think every single futurist deals with the imposter syndrome. I think almost every day, but there are some steps that help, relieve that. Like when I became a member of the Futurist Committee of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, of course, that was a great confirmation that I'm doing that job as a professional researcher, and I'm doing at least not a bad job. So there are steps like that, but the skills, I think digital literacy is one skill you need here, because all the announcements, news, reports come out digitally, not in person anymore. So you have to be very efficient and accurate at being able to scan through the internet for looking for specific information, and then to assess the quality of resources. You have to be good at creating visions and scenarios For that, I have been reading and watching science fiction for 3 decades to get better at that skill. And maybe one more thing, you have to actively play with the what if question. I think that's what helps me the most. Try to envision how certain technologies that are announced today might evolve over time, and what can change in the future. So maybe these 3 skills were the ones I have been focusing on. I still do that every single day. Hi, Gilbert Rubbles. Thank you for the question about hybrid cloud computing and blockchain. I think we've covered blockchain plenty of times before, so I won't comment on that. But we do have quite extended articles on medicalfuturists.com about how blockchain specifically could be used for healthcare purposes. Unplugged Heartfulness. What is the future about genetic testing? Well, I've had about 6 different genomic testing services. I had my genome sequenced. It's a very delicate and sensitive issue. It comes with anxiety when you wait for your genetic test results, but the field is still nowhere to be found. I mean, like yesterday, they announced that the Human Genome Project was finally completed. About 8% of the data were missing when the first completion was announced 20 years ago. And now they have the complete human genome, and we still don't use much genomic information in medical practice today. So the expectations are high, but these services haven't been able to deliver consistently, and that's an issue. That's why also I'm quite pessimistic about the next few years too. Blood Execute. How should we view the increasing use of digital therapeutics? What are the key considerations? I think the first hype about such therapeutics many years ago was around the idea that let's put a microchip into every single medication so we can make sure that people take those medications, but that's an unsustainable and actually crazy idea to have. So now we see that maybe there are 2 areas where digital therapeutics can indeed play a role. One is, like you mentioned, for patients with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, where compliance can be an issue. And the other one is for elderly patients in general. There are these digital dispensers, of course, but when it's really crucial that they took the medication they were prescribed, then it makes sense to use the technology, even if it's a bit more expensive. That makes sure that they won't have side effects or they won't be hospitalized because of missing a few doses. Dr. Masapu has an interesting question. Can automation of IQs, I don't know what you're referring to, with an alert system help in developing countries like India, where we have a lot of healthcare professionals to work? I mean, when there is enough supply of personnel. Automation of focus, that was, can you please elaborate on what you meant by that? Wow, there are so many questions coming in, guys. Thank you so much. I'm doing my best here, and I couldn't even go through some news I picked up for you before the session. Thank you, Unplugged Thoughtful. It's very kind from you. SP with SPTV, creating a virtual pharmacy for learning purposes, especially in the era of pharmacy practice, internship, and continuous learning. I don't see that happening. That there might be examples, but I haven't seen any. I think where pharmacists are the most underused resource of healthcare. I always say that for patients, from the patient side, but from the medical professional side, their expertise and knowledge that they get in medical school are simply not used. So I think pharmacies have a huge gap to fill in, and that gap is about time and communication with patients. They have the time and the chance to communicate about diseases, medications, lifestyle insights with their patients, while most primary care physicians simply don't have that much time. I see such a bigger potential in that for pharmacists than creating virtual pharmacies for training. Ivor Juster, what conferences do you recommend for learning about medical futurism and connecting with medical futurists? I hope I could tell you to go to this or that event, but there won't be any this year, maybe only virtually. Doctors 2.0 and You has been one of my favorite events for many years in Paris. As an example, Stanford Medicine X is a perfect example for that same purpose. The conferences organized by HIMSS in the US, of course, are great. And EIT, the European, I have to cheat here. So EIT Health is another excellent organization that organizes events about the future of medicine too. Apurva Joshi, overload of treatment options has both people and doctors confused. No doubts about that. Do you know of any technologies that help refine filter choices? I think there are no technologies for that, but there is a better communication gap for that, through which, by having real life discussions that focuses on time, attention, and empathy, physicians and patients could go through could come to better decisions. But about, if your question implies that if there are technologies for helping physicians make better decisions, then of course there are medical decision support tools. IBM Watson, and there are about 15 companies we included in our annual top 100 digital health companies list that focus on automation in medical decision support. So yeah, there are some in that respect. Frederick Willemsen Haug, it's a very interesting question. What degree are you suggesting to work with medical technology, even though one doesn't necessarily want to work with patient one-to-one? Is it smart to become a medical doctor to be taken seriously? That's a kind question at the end. I assume you imply by the question that if you want to develop innovations for healthcare medical purposes, do you have to become a physician working with patients face to face? I don't think so, but it would make sense to involve physicians even in the design process of those developments, gadgets, technologies, or to involve patients if the technology tries to fill in or meet a patient need. But otherwise, you don't see physicians leading big pharma, big medical technology companies, or even health insurance companies today. So I don't think these two things have to go hand in hand. 53 Rajiv, what is the future of ICU at home? It's an interesting thing to ask. I gave a keynote about a month ago to the Society of Intensive Care Therapies in the US. And I talked about the way that specialty will simply occupy a larger percentage of beds in hospitals in 10 years from now, because more and more patients with chronic conditions will be able to go home or be able to be taken care of from afar, wherever they are, becoming the point of care themselves. Therefore, the rest of beds will be offered to ICUs. I don't see ICU moving to our homes though, because of the special applications and gadgets and technologies those departments require. I see patients, but I see more patients only go to a healthcare institution with acute conditions to treat or care for, or with emergencies. Otherwise, but for chronic patients, they want to become the point of care themselves. What is the unplugged heartfulness? What is the future about health sensors? Well, the best, I mean, if I could devise a future for health sensors, they have to be comfortable to wear. They have to be almost invisible and working seamlessly with other technologies like medical records and our smartphones. They have to be secure enough that I could trust the company behind them, but open enough to be able to combine the technology with other companies' technologies. And I know I'm devising here an ideal future which will not take place, but that should be the future of health sensors. And measuring data that actually matter. I mean, data that can lead to better medical decisions or better insights about lifestyle or health or disease management. So really impacting the lives of patients or the jobs of physicians, not just measuring data because they can measure it theoretically. Ivor Jester, also, of course, exponential medicine too, of course. They have excellent speakers every year, so it makes sense to check them out. Angela Preda, it's great to see you here. other than VR in surgical training, do you know of VR medical training, like trauma simulation platforms that are available? Absolutely. I don't know if you were here about 20 minutes ago. I just talked about Skip Rizzo, Albert Skip Rizzo, and his team, and they have been working on such training simulations for many medical specialties and even medical conditions, including PTSD, depression, and so on, and phobias. Actually, I think that's the one of the most prominent examples. And if you check out what Albert Skip Rizzo and his team have been working on, you will see really amazing evidence-based examples in this case about using VR for training. Oh, Dr. Masapu, thank you now. Now I understand the question. So can automation in healthcare units like intensive care with alert systems help patients, and can it decrease the manpower required to run hospitals? I think it could decrease the required workforce for the logistics of running a hospital, but not for caring for patients. I think that will have to take place in person in the vast majority of cases. But for the rest, for administration, for analyzing medical records and all these, you simply don't need people anymore if you have automation good enough to take over those roles. Apurva Joshi, of course, that's my pleasure. Thank you for the great question. Sapam Titi, please elaborate on the future of computer-aided drug design. Well, I won't be able to do that for you because I'm not an expert in the field. However, we have an analysis published on medicalfuturist.com in which, here it is, I will just share the link in the comment section with you, in which we elaborated very much about the companies using AI in drug discovery, development, repurposing, and drug design, all the four major areas. So you can find real life examples there. Unplugged thoughtfulness, I don't see how skin closure for now could be done in any other ways than through the traditional surgical tools. I think those tools have been going through some improvements, but I haven't seen anything really extraordinary technology replacing that aspect of surgery. So before diving into the last few questions, just some examples of the last couple of days, some news I liked or hated, like this one from Amazon. I don't know if you've seen the Amazon wellness chamber that they offered for stressed staff. Literally, they put a cabin, if not a coffin, in the middle of Amazon factories, and they encouraged their factory workers to have a piece of few minutes for themselves, some peace of mind within those cabins. Can you imagine yourself reaching mindfulness in a cabin in a factory? I mean, I cherish and applaud maybe the effort the Amazon has put into this, but the idea is simply awful. And even Amazon deleted many of the tweets they published about this because of the backlash they got from people around the world in social media. Another news I found exciting was about a smart mask. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to persuade you to wear a smart mask. I'm fed up with my own masks as well. Of course, I wear them when I have to wear them. But the idea has been around since the beginning of the pandemic, whether we could use smart masks and it would make sense to include certain technologies or health sensors into those masks. And medgadget.com had an excellent review about the AirPop Active Plus Halo Smart Mask. They really give you all the insights you need to make a decision whether such a mask would be beneficial in your life or not. Regarding the price and everything, I'm quite shifting away from them, but it's great to see that some health journalists go behind the background too. One more thing, I mentioned before Google's new effort about developing an algorithm to analyze skin lesions. It's not just them. We even have an article on medicalfuturist.com about this issue. Even Advanced Human Imaging came up with a skin lesion analyzing application. So this area is booming, and we have a new article coming out, I think this week. We have a new series called Emerging Trends or Trend Alert, and this is an emerging trend we have to keep a close eye on. One more thing here about Apple Watches. There was and Fitbit smartwatches. There was a small study just using a few hundreds of people all together. Some of them all of them having the same heart condition. Some of them wearing Apple Watch or Fitbit, and the others do not. And they tried to find out what was the difference between them, and they actually found that people who were wearing wearables didn't call into the office more, which is a great thing to see as a consequence or conclusion. But they had more medical. That's here. People with wearables did have more medical procedures done during those 3 months when they performed the study. It's a small study, so it's hard to draw any conclusions from that, but it might mean that people with more data, it might lead to a more insightful doctor-patient visit. It will be a beneficial thing then, or it might also indicate that with more data, people get more anxious and they want medical procedures because they see that based on data, they might need the procedure. And that could also lead to more procedures being performed. We will need larger studies to conclude that for us. And one thing here about the Alzheimer drug, I'm sure you've heard about that. Last week, the FDA approved the first new Alzheimer's disease drug for more than 20 years. And it's great news, but there are a lot of issues around that approval. Many committee members who took part in the approval and voted no, they now resigned after the decision was made because they didn't favor approving the drug. And now the BBC really describes, and the Time magazine also had an article about that. They describe all the background details about such an approval process. The reason why it's such an important thing to discuss here is that if the medical professionals and researchers start having doubts about the FDA's approval processes, then it's a problem. Then we might lose hope, we might lose trust in the whole system, and that leads to chaos. So the FDA really has to communicate it clearly to make sure that people will get back on the same train with them. All right. Frederick, thank you. Brilliant channel. Thank you so much for the kind words. But I still want your take on the specific choice of degree that would fit a career in medical technology, biomedical engineering, and nanotechnology. I think if I could start my career all over again, I would be a baseball player, a science fiction writer, and a movie director. But the fourth would be being a biomedical engineer. If I wanted to come into this field now, jokes aside, becoming a medical professional does help see the clinical and patient needs, but nothing on a technological side. Becoming an engineer might make me really great at designing stuff for them, but I would not see the patient and clinical side. I know I'm just thinking out loud here. It's easier to replace the part about the patient and clinical needs by asking patients and physicians than to replace the engineering skills you need to develop technologies. So yes, I would choose biomedical engineering for sure. Lorenzo Di Francesco, what do you see as the standard physician diagnostic equipment of the future? Portable ultrasound have a role? Absolutely they do. You will get surprised, but we have an article on medicalfuturist.com about the medical black bag of the future. I think Judith Cusco, our editor-in-chief, can share that with you. We even have a video on our YouTube channel about the medical black bag from the future. I think it involved a digital blood pressure cuff or a combined device with ECG and heart rate monitor, food allergy trackers or sensors, an eye tracker for vision and color blindness, and a portable ultrasound device. I just reviewed a portable ultrasound device with AI guidance built in a few days ago, so I will share that with you in a couple of days. Portable ultrasound devices might be the unicorns of digital health today. They are real. Now they exist despite unicorns. And they will play a huge role in the future of even primary care practices, not just physicians in general. Christopher Eng Fletcher, for those early in their healthcare career, what key concepts, trends from both a tech and non-tech standpoint do you think are important to be aware of? I think I answered a similar question about 25 minutes ago, but I'm happy to repeat them. Digital literacy is key in that. The futurist mindset is very important. And it's also, by this I mean that you need to learn to live a little bit in the future. And you have to be able to assess the quality or the level of effectiveness of advanced technologies. And for that, you have to be really good at looking at technologies and understanding how those are evaluated in studies and how those work. Maybe these three. But we have an article on medicalfuturist.com about, well, that article focused on training medical students, but I think those skills can be applied to anyone else. Yes. Unplugged Heartfulness, my favorite channel, The Medical Futurist. Thank you so much. It's very kind from you. Ivor Juster, always informative and thought-provoking. Thank you, Ivor. Looking forward to meeting you at the conference once they start up again. Please don't even tell me. I'm looking forward to meeting you all in real-life events and being on stages and seeing technologies and expos and exhibitions. I very much look forward to that. I don't see any, by the way, any big medical events being organized in person, even for Q3 of 2021. But I remain optimistic that by the very end of this year, maybe very early next year, we could finally travel to live events. Gilbert Rubbles, that's a very important question. I need to include that. And we only have about time for about one or two more questions. I'm sorry about that. What is the future, or are there any developing technologies playing a vital role for the future treatment of anxiety and depression? I think, because of the pandemic, there is a epidemic going on, like the mental health second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have to deal with this. And I'm sure you've seen a swarm of mindfulness apps and meditation apps coming out in the last year or so. Personally, I don't believe in them. I think mindfulness can only be reached without technologies. And I think dealing with anxiety and depression, all these mental health conditions, must take place in person with a physician, with a medical professional. A professional who can help us deal with these issues. But while we are waiting for the chance to meet those professionals, an AI-based chatbot could provide a sort of empathy, a sort of guidance in the process. Now those patients just have to wait without any medical help. So at least this will be something for them. And maybe even when they can finally meet a medical professional, the AI could create a report about them. And I think the NHS in the UK has been working on such technologies for patients dealing with anxiety and depression. Maybe one or two more questions. Jose Quintini. I think your question also refers to big technology companies. About remote healthcare, do you think big players will prevail over the high number of small players? I think small players have a better chance to serve patients with very specific needs, like rare conditions or smaller patient populations where the issues are so specific that you cannot just provide remote care with general physicians. But big players like Amazon, I know they just expanded their telehealth service in more than 16 states in the US a few days ago. So big players like Amazon will be able to provide general remote care services much better than any small player in the market. That's how I see the distinction between the two. Of course, thank you so much. I'm happy that I could give you some answers and thank you for all these amazing questions. Maybe one more thing here. Tony Das, do devices which are not FDA approved have any place in the wearable journey for patients? If you mean in the US, then not all health devices require an FDA approval unless they have a specific health or medical purpose or diagnostic procedure, or come with risks about the data those can measure. I think there are health devices that don't require such approvals, but even in the cases of those, we must make sure that they're at least as efficient as devices on the market already. They are not misleading people. They are not saying things like they're not overclaiming what they can do. Like there was a genetic testing company that I tried a few years ago that said that they can claim they can define my personality based on my genomic test. As a researcher coming from genomics, I wanted to see that, but of course that was not the case. So they have to be very cautious, and that's why we need regulatory oversight. But the FDA approval is such a high threshold that not all devices will have to go through that. And with that, as we just ran out of time, I thank you so much for being with me today too in this monthly live Q&A session. As usual, you will find all the analysis we publish twice a week on medicalfuturists.com, and we publish 5 or 10 analysis every single day on our Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram channels. We also publish YouTube videos here, so please subscribe so you won't miss any new future bits and episodes we come out about the future of digital health technologies, medicine, and healthcare here on YouTube. And as you know, we do everything for free. You can support us in 2 ways, the whole Medical Futurist team. One is by buying the executive summaries and ebooks we publish on leanpub.com. Our editor-in-chief can share the link with you. And the second, it's even more direct way of supporting us. You can become a patron on patreon.com/themedicalfuturist. We have hundreds of patrons there, and we design and create specific content only for them. So there are things only our patrons will see day by day, but nobody else. Plus, on the highest patron level, all the patrons on the Advanced Medical Futurist tier, they get all the ebooks we publish for free. So it's quite a good bargain from every perspective. Plus, by this, even with $3, like this is the first tier, you can support the team, the Medical Futurist team, so we can keep on producing free content across a range of channels worldwide. That might hopefully lead to a better healthcare system for patients and physicians. That's the job we are trying to do here. So thank you so much for all the amazing questions and for being here today. Of course, it was my pleasure to try to answer your amazing and insightful questions. I really did my best, but we will have a next time, and next time we will have a thematic session. I will announce that session and the topics later on. But for now, I hope you have a great day. Please stay safe, and thank you so much again for being here. Bye-bye.